of the garage in early July during a heat wave and took it to local pawn shop, hoping to fetch a big price for it. After the police called to say they had located it, the pawn shop owner said the guy just couldn't understand why there wouldn't be a hot market for an expensive snowblower year round. One time this guy brought in a chair he said Lincoln sat in. I called my Lincoln chair guy and he said it was fake. I wonder if your Lincoln guy knows my Lincoln guy. Had a guy try get $100 for 2 wheat pennies and 2 buffalo nickels, 4-legged. About 5 years ago I had a guy call the store and ask if we took GPSs. I told him we did. Then he asked the address to the store. I told him. Then he asked me how to get there. Take the GPS out of its original packaging and slash its value by over 90%? No GPS collector would be that foolish. A kid from my school had a letter signed by Abraham Lincoln. He brought it to show and tell one day, and we were all super impressed. In grade 12, he stole it from his dad and went to pawn it. He bragged about how he was going to be rich. It turns out his grandfather forged the letter and gave it to his dad as a gift. Watching Antiques Roadshow a couple of years back, a woman came in to get her old lamp appraised. The show's appraiser took the lamp, said something along the lines of "Wow, priceless Ming vase." He then proceeded to remove the whole lamp section from the base, threw it away and said unfortunately somebody decided to make it a lamp and drilled a hole in the bottom, rendering the priceless Ming vase worthless. I've never seen anybody go from okay to just hit the lottery to somebody just flushed my lottery ticket down the toilet in such a short space of time. There was a buy and sell by my house that would give you $5 for any game and sell every game for 10. I used to go in and check prices on all games, and if I would make more than 10 from GameStop I would buy the game, go to GameStop and sell it, and then buy all the crappy games GameStop had that were less than $5 and take it back to the buy and sell to make more money. I was a heroin addict at the time, so that was my job when I wasn't working at the restaurant. Edit, my and working. Comic book shop employee. Every single seller has a total mint collection and a first appearance of Superman or Batman. There have been literally hundreds of Batman Superman #1s printed over the years. Every time they reboot a series, it starts at issue #1. The people who were polite about it, I didn't mind. The people who thought we were trying to rip them off and that their books were priceless just did my head in. Worked at a traditional games store. Had plenty of sketchy white trash people coming in with their kids' old Yu-Gi-Oh and Magic cards thinking they're extremely valuable. Usually it was just a mismatched starter set from the early 2000s. Or the like. I'm not sure what started the idea that old trading cards were going to be ridiculously valuable. But no. I won't give you meth money for your dark magician. The level of disappointment, and oftentimes outright anger on their part, was difficult to deal with. I began just telling trashy looking people, who weren't store regulars, that we didn't purchase cards. Did once have a guy bring in a collection that had an ugly looking Black Lotus. Gave him a good deal for it. My dad had some drugged up women come in and try to pawn her crack. Not a pawn shop worker. But this is still kind of a cool story, or at least I think. Either way, both the shop owner and I were happy with the events that went down. I used to frequent yard sales, buy vintage items, and then take them to the antiques shop and make a little money on the side. One day, I found this little glass figurine at a yard sale for $25. When I flipped the item over and saw the red Occupied Japan logo, I got extremely excited and bought it on the spot. I took it over the shop and sold it for $45. The shop owner wouldn't go any higher. But hey, I made $44.75 of a quick purchase, so I wasn't too worried. The figure was actually worth about $125. Either way, I made money. And that figure is still sitting in his shop for sale at $125. Not a pawn shop, but GameStop. Dude rolled in with hundreds of bootleg games and a bunch of modded consoles. He couldn't fathom why I wouldn't take them. I used to work at one, and back when they took DVDs that was a constant issue. People trying to sell us DVDs they burned off their computer and getting mad we wouldn't take them. I'm a pawnbroker. Somebody brought in their dead grandmother's gold tooth. Plucked from her ashes. With the tooth still in it. We told her that the tooth had to be separated from the gold for us to weigh it. They desecrated their loved one's remains for less than $2. A guy literally brought in an RPG. He was doing yard work for this old lady whose husband had passed. She gave it to him for doing some yard work, not realizing it was live and active. The guy was career military, and after the GOM squad came and disabled it, they went to her house and found a trove of similarly very illegal military grade weapons. I took an old $10 bill into a dealer to see how much it was worth. Don't recall the year, but it was old. Guy says $10. Showed me what a bill would have to be like. Spent 30 minutes in his store with him looking at old rare money. Edit, changed to rare. That was cool of him, and not just brush you off since you weren't trying to waste his time, and not many know a lot about it. Especially since valuable old money is a totally different league than its super old money. Collecting old coins and bills is cool, right? Please say yes. A good friend of mine owns a pawn shop in Florida. He once bought a collectible book of state quarters for less than face value of the coins. The customer wasn't bright enough to pop the quarters out of the book and spend them. My buddy's ability to keep a straight face in those situations and make the customer feel like he's getting a deal provides me endless entertainment. I'd gladly pay 2x the face price of the coins for the US Virgin Islands quarter. US territories. And I believe a Puerto Rico quarter. My friends knew I had a quarter collection back in high school, so when they found a Virgin Islands quarter they taunted me and put it into the vending machine to buy chips. A friend's uncle allowed us to shadow him for a day at his pawn shop. A guy walked in with a metal lockbox and said he had something worth billions. He opened the lockbox and there were chips in it and the smell of spray paint. He claimed they were leftovers of the cross Jesus was crucified on. He is descended from an ancient and noble line of knights who took oaths to protect the cross. He wanted $2,000 for the lockbox and wood chips. I don't work in a pawn shop, but I bought my first guitar in one. The big defense contractor in my town laid off over 10,000 people overnight and the contagion spread. I was looking for my first guitar. And I'm cheap. After checking the music stores, I hit up the pawn shops near work. While I'm looking, this clean-cut guy in his early 30s comes in trying to pawn his guitar. Hard case. And effects. Since the shop had a bunch, they offered him crap. Evidently, and he left. He was almost crying, saying he got laid off and had to pay some bills. I followed him out and asked him what he wanted for it. He said $100. And I took it. I also gave him my phone number and said he could buy it back when he got back on his feet. I never heard from him. I'm looking at it now, unplayed for months. I hope everything worked out for him. I worked in a jewelry store during the peak of the everybody buys gold and diamonds phase. A group of kids comes in with a ring they found in the parking lot. It's an obvious CZ. Which I tell the ringleader, "Heh," as soon as he hands it to me. One of the others demands. A touch annoyed. How do you know? In one of those excellent to rare moments of perfect reaction I asked, why'd you bring it to me? Because you're a jeweler. Oh. As a worker in the ghetto I get grills and gold teeth almost daily. Straight from the mouth, and then they get mad when I can't accept it and throw a fit. Every employee wears panic buttons to call the cops immediately if something happens as well. I may be late to this, but I worked at a pawn shop for about 6 years. I once had a customer walk up to the counter and slide a gold coin to me and say, "I think this is gold." Man. This particular customer reeked of bile and looked like he was high on everything possible. I looked at the coin and slid it back to him and replied, "I think it's a Chuck E. Cheese token. I can tell by the mouse on it." He just said, "Oh," and walked away. That was when I noticed he had sheet his pants to the point it was almost all the way down his pant leg. Had a guy try selling me a gun. Before I could even nope him out of there, shop is in NJ. We do not buy gums. He began to point the gum around with people all over the store. Pulling the trigger. That guy was a special kind of guy. Fortunately the gum wasn't loaded. But still. Pawn shops are not like that TV show. People don't bring in valuable antiques to be appraised. I would guess the most likely answer for real pawn shops is wedding rings that end up being fake. Pawn shops are not like that TV show. I don't believe you. I've got a buddy that's an expert in pawn shops and I'm gonna give him a call and find out. I don't work at the pawn shop. But my friend does. People bring in dumb shit all the time. To get a few dollars for dope. It starts from a Candies box stolen from a shop next to the pawn shop to plungers. Rubber ducks. Electronics. Real and fake jewelry they thought was real and ending on cars. I just have to say, I've only tried to sell something to a pawn shop once. Some kind of CB radio setup and related components. And they offered me $20. When I told them that wasn't enough they laughed at me and said I wouldn't get a better offer anywhere else. I ended up selling it on Craigslist for $300. Not a pawn shop worker. But I was in one with a friend of mine when a man who looked to have enjoyed more than just a few crack rocks in his day came inside with a sink. A sink that he apparently just ripped out of a hotel or kitchen of an abandoned house or something. And I do mean ripped out. No idea what he thought he would get for it. But the guy behind the counter told him in no uncertain terms that he needed to leave. And take his sink with him. It was goddamn hilla. Edit, it was pretty hilla. You just had to be there. One time this guy brought in a giant petrified turd and thought it was a meteor. I'm not a pawn shop owner, but when I was 10 or 11 I caught a black widow spider and excitedly brought it to the pawn shop in town inside a Mountain Dew bottle. Ready to claim my bounty. They weren't interested. Pet shop wouldn't take it either. I made a cardboard sign and stood on the side of the road, but I never found a buyer. Worked at a comic book and memorabilia store and people have really messed up notions of value. Just because it is old doesn't mean it is valuable. Just because it is rare doesn't mean there is a market for it. The worst was when people would come in with things that were signed with no authentication and demand outrageous prices. Some old lady and her obviously tweaker granddaughter brought in a comic they claimed was signed by Stan Lee and wanted $1,000 for it. We laughed them out of the shop. Also, a picture of you with William Shatner that he signed has no value to anyone but you. I went to college in a farm town in northern Colorado. I had a red leather jacket that I bought in high school that I wanted to sell in one of the pawn shops out there. I never wore it. And would rather have cash than the jacket. I didn't want money for Drew Gus. Just money because I was a broke college student. They refused to buy it because it was red. And that color was somehow gang related. I had no idea that farm town had any gang problems. But whatever. I literally just had a lady walk out on me angry that I couldn't offer any money on her small wooden spice rack. It even had half empty spices still on it. A few months ago an old man came in with a trash bag full of used bongs. Complete with weed and dripping with bong water. Said he's selling all his son's stuff. He was such a sweet old dude, I felt bad and told him to break it all up in the dumpster outside and not ride around with it. I get a ton of old coins that people bring in thinking they're worth a bunch of money, and I usually have even older stuff in my change drawer that I can show them. Most people laugh about it. Also, I have seen quite a few gently used dildos in my time as well. A month ago, man stole a lawnmower from the front of our store. Well, just 2 days ago, he returned to the shop with the exact same lawnmower, claiming it was his. He tried to sell it to us. Not only did the serial number on that mower match the one we had, but it still had our price tag on the handle. Used book dealer here. I had a couple tell me they were bringing in a book they saved for their retirement in a safety deposit box. A signed first edition of Twain's Huck Finn. Sadly they had a modern Reader's Digest copy with a monograph signature. Someone else offered me their Shakespeare's First Folio. Printed in 1946.
I used to work at a pawn shop in Los Angeles. One time this guy brought in $100 two bills, non-consecutive, and wanted a loan of $120. My boss told me to do the loan, so I followed instruction and gave the guy $120. The guy then managed to not come back for the bills, so we made an $80 profit from sheer stupidity. Kind of the opposite. But in the mid-80s I worked for a guy that ran food trailers that went to different festivals. etc. It was a blast of a summer job. But anyway. Kids would dig around the house to find money to blow at the arcades. And for food. Rides. etc. Many of these kids would get into the coin collection. Seeing a 10 or 20. But not realizing they were silver certificates. Silver quarters daily. Indian head pennies. Even had a guy pay for his drink with a roll of buffalo nickels. I manage a pawn shop trading post in New Jersey and could tell you hundreds of stories related to this. But the dumbest thing I've had someone bring in was a used lifelike 6 doll. It was something that you pay somewhere around $3,000 to $5,000 for. He was just completely flabbergasted that we would not buy it. 10 years EXP in running a pawn shop. Fake Rolex watches. Family heirlooms. Parking lot buys that turned out to be fake were the normal. Weirdest thing I've loaned on would be dentures. I'd give the guy 10-20. I was asked why I took them and my response was always the same. If that ducker wants to eat solid food again, he'll come get them. He always came and redeemed them. I run a video game store and several people weekly bring armloads of old Madden, NBA, and other sports games in thinking they're going to get all kinds of cash. They're very upset when I give them $5 out of pity. Then there are the moron pawn shop employees. Or smart, depending on your perspective. I regularly see used sheet harbor freight tools marked up higher than new. Just last week I saw a $129.99 central pneumatic air compressor they were trying to sell at $199.99. Can't verify if this is true or not, but I remember my grandpa recently talking about some guys who robbed a house and decided to pawn off the spoils. The only problem was that the stuff they stole was actually from the pawn shop owner's house, who then called the cops on them.